The ACC sucks. Now that we've got that out of the way, welcome into the Voice of College Football. For the best in discussion, debate, and analysis, please like the video and subscribe right here. We will detail in our conference rankings why the ACC was so bad, how that was obvious to everyone based on the results on the field. Here we are ranking the teams within the ACC. Of course, these are power rankings, but just to give you confirmation of some of the obvious metrics involving the ACC. And we've got nothing against the ACC. I love ACC football, watch it all the time, but it's just that we have to tell the truth. The conference was horrific this year. Deplorable, awful. 2-11 in postseason play. And even if you are in the camp that postseason games, bowl games do not count, they are not relevant. The ACC was 9-16 against the other power conferences in the regular season. All right, let's get to the horrific of the horrific. That would be Florida State. Exponentially horrific. Number 17 in the ACC. This is historically bad. Preseason top 10 coming off, of course, a 12-0 regular season in 2023 to 2-10. If you can find a team in the history of college football that had as catastrophic a landing as Florida State from year to year, please leave it down in the comments section, because I believe this to be the worst plummet in the history of college football, the worst decline. They beat one FBS team, Cal, and that's only because the Golden Bears missed 3 field goals. They had arguably the worst offense in college football. Listen to the point totals after they scored a whopping 21 in the opener against Georgia Tech. Florida State scored 13, 12, 14, 16, 13, 16, 14, 11, 3, and 11 against FBS opponents. And yes, they finished number 132 in yards per play and total offense. The acquisition of DJ Uiagalelei was obviously a disaster. The hope is that the transfer portal will kick in like it did a couple years ago. They are currently ranked 6th in the 247 Sports transfer portal rankings, but at number 17, and they earned it, FSU. So while Florida State has shown us the biggest one-year drop in recent college football history and maybe all time, Stanford has given us that program drop unlike any other program in the country. The Stanford Cardinal, 94-27 from 2010 to 2018. That's a 9-year span. The program has gone 12-36 since then. Troy Taylor, second season. We need some answers, sir, because, again, it was awful by the Cardinal. 3-9, 2-6 in the ACC in its first season in that conference. They did defeat Syracuse and Louisville. Those were complete aberrations, defeating 2 of the best teams in the conference. Otherwise, they had a string of losses by 26, 24, 42, 30, and 31 points. At number 16 in the ACC Power Rankings, right here at the Voice of College Football, the Tree. After a 4-8 2023 season, head coach Dave Clawson said, "We're a 4-8 football team. We are who the record says we are. I'm a 4-8 football coach." And I thought, well, Dave Clawson, you are much, much, much better than that. You're winning 7 or 8 games at Wake Forest. He's an excellent football coach. But after confirming that 2023 season with another 4-8 finish with only 2 wins in the conference, Dave Clawson, yes, officially you are a 4-8 coach, but no longer the head coach at Wake Forest. Of course, we've got Jake Dickert coming in from Washington State. But for Wake in 2024, they were pretty much transparent, completely absent from the scene in college football, irrelevant to the nth degree, and just a string of bad losses. Their best win of the season against NC State. It all started with a blown fourth quarter lead of 2 touchdowns against Virginia when they had a chance to go to 3-0. At number 15 in our ACC Power Rankings, Wake. That 31-30 win by Virginia over Wake is the difference between ranking number 14 and number 15. Virginia did win 5 games because of the comeback win against the Demon Deacons, but Tony Elliott's team is listless once again. 3-5 in the conference. The best wins against BC and Pitt, a couple 7-6 teams. They played well against Louisville, lost on a late touchdown. Anthony Calandria, their young quarterback, has though hit the transfer portal after a marginal 13 to 11 touchdown to interception ratio this season. He's off to UNLV. Tony Elliott in year number 4. We need to see some progress. At number 14 in the ACC, the Wahoos. Another invisible program in college football from year to year is Cal. I also deemed them the unluckiest team in college football, closing out with a loss against UNLV in a bowl game in which they had to play their 4th-string quarterback. Their starting quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, is off to Indiana. This team beat Auburn early on. That's their best win. I know the Auburn Tigers were not good at 5-7. So when I say unlucky, I mean they lost to Florida State because they missed 3 field goals, and they lost by 5 points. They had that 35-10 lead against Miami. Yes, you could say that they're horrible and they're blowing big leads. I also choose to look at the field goal kicking and some bad bounces along the way. They missed a field goal with 2 minutes left. They lost to Pitt 17-15. They lost to NC State by 1 point. Yes, Cal now will look to a original signee who went to Oregon, now coming back, the number 1 player in the state of Hawaii. Jaron Siwi Sagapulatelli is back to possibly guide the offense after they have lost 3 transfer quarterbacks. At number 13 in the ACC, new addition, Cal. Can the grouchy, stern, aging coach do better than the soft, cuddly, aging coach? Mac Brown, you're out. Bill Belichick in Chapel Hill to take on North Carolina and the Tar Heels' underachieving program. Mac Brown took over 6 or 7 years ago and immediately elevated this program after Larry Fedora went only 5-19 the 2 previous seasons. And North Carolina was making some strides, looked to be on the upswing. But when it was all said and done, they wasted Drake May at quarterback. They wasted a ton of defensive recruited talent that turned into awful defenses on the field. And North Carolina finished with a 6-7 season under Mac Brown, who went just 44-33 in his stay in Chapel Hill. They lost their starting quarterback, Max Johnson, in week 1 at Minnesota. They did get to an Orange Bowl under Mac Brown and also, again, one ACC championship game. Quickly lost by 4 touchdowns. Bill Belichick, it's all in your hands. Number 12 in the ACC in 2024 under Mac Brown. UNC. I have been critical of Dave Doeren for good reason. Look up the videos from past years when Dave Doeren just seemed to get a free ride at NC State despite marginal season after marginal season. Actually, marginal would depict a 500 coach. He was winning 37% of his ACC games, but right about the time that I produced my second "Why Does Dave Doeren Still Have a Job" video, he kicked it into gear starting in 2020 on a 34-16 run, but it was back to mediocrity for NC State this season at 6-7. They lost to East Carolina in a bowl game. Now, of course, the Grayson McCall experiment failed. He was injured after a few games. CJ Bailey comes in, 17 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. Unlike some of the like-seeded teams around them in the rankings, NC State actually did play close games. 7 of 9 down the stretch by 1 score. But again, only 3-5 in the ACC, a dismal ACC when it was all said and done. At number 11 in the ACC, Wolfpack. There seemed to be a lot of worse in this rendition of Power Rankings right here, the Voice of College Football, outlining the ACC and how bad it's been. How bad was Pitt during a 6-game losing streak to conclude the season after a 7-0 start in which they would have the dubious distinction of being the worst 7-0 football team that I can think of. And then the big showdown in Dallas against SMU to take over control of the ACC. And did Pitt show up for that showdown? No, they were down 48-11 in the third quarter. And after that, it was just dismal outing after another. Pat Narduzzi is 5-11 in the ACC in the last 2 years, and he says a lot of dumb things that don't necessarily endear himself to the fan base or the college football fan in general, or maybe the administration. He could be on the hot seat in 2025. Then a loss to Toledo, a group of 5 team in a bowl game, and Pitt basically couldn't play any of its quarterbacks in that game and had to go deep on the depth chart in losing 48-46. It all concluded at 7-6, but it was 7-0, then 0-6. At number 10 in the ACC, Pitt. Boston College also posted a 7-6 final mark in Bill O'Brien's first season, but the feel was so much different in Chestnut Hill under the former Penn State and Houston Texans head coach. I will call this a successful first season for Bill O'Brien. Best win against Syracuse, worst loss against Virginia. Strong showings against Mizzou, SMU, and Louisville. And even though their one-time starting quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, quit on the team in early November when he was benched in favor of Grayson James, who's a better downfield passer, even though Castellanos showed a 18-5 touchdown to interception ratio, which is not awful. He quit on the team, but BC held it together and made it to a bowl game. Lost that one against Nebraska 20-15 at number 9 in the ACC. BC, partly due to a weak schedule, partly due to a ton of production coming back, Virginia Tech was a chic pick to cause some noise, make a stir in the ACC in 2024, but it did not happen. The Hokies finished at 4-4 in the conference. Their best performances in 2024, best wins there against their best performances in the conference. A win against BC by 21. They beat Georgia Tech minus Haynes King by 15 points. It was that middle of the season loss to Miami in which they had a 2-score lead in the fourth quarter and almost pulled off the Hail Mary at the end that really could have turned the season. They lost to Minnesota in a bowl game and finish at number 8 in our ACC power rankings. We credit Mike Elko with one of the best recent job performances, lifting Duke to 9-4 and 8-5 seasons. Well, we'll have to give Manny Diaz some similar credit. Of course, he picked up the recruits that Mike Elko brought in and also some of the leftovers from the David Cutcliffe era. And the final finish was 9-4. Now, maybe some smoke and mirrors were involved. Duke's best performances were losses. Lost to SMU in overtime. That was a game in which Duke could have placed themselves in position to get to the ACC championship game. They had a double-digit lead against Miami. They blew it and were blown out in the fourth quarter by 22 points. Duke did not beat a team with a winning record in Power 5 conference play. They lose their quarterback into 2025, Malik Murphy. They pick up Darian Mensah, one of the ballyhooed transfer portal additions from Tulane. 9-4, good start for Manny Diaz. Our number 7 team in the ACC, Duke. Best 7-6 team in America? Maybe. Georgia Tech obviously played that scintillating 8-overtime game, a slugfest that most of us watched on Thanksgiving weekend against the Bulldogs, and they took down Miami. And when Haynes King was on the field, 14 touchdowns, 2 picks, 11 rushing touchdowns, and elite playmakers like Eric Singleton, Malik Rutherford, and running back Jamal Haynes just shy of 1,000 yards for a third consecutive year. Georgia Tech could play with most teams in the nation, but they also lost to Virginia Tech again, minus Haynes King by 15 points, and it all wrapped up with a bowl loss to Vandy. At number 6 in the ACC, the Ramblin' Wreck. If we give a thumbs up to Manny Diaz in his first season at Duke for going 9-4, we got to give the gold star to Fran Brown, 10-3 at Syracuse. Now, the schedule may have turned the Cuse's way, missing teams like Clemson and SMU. However, Kyle McCord, of course, played out of his mind for much of the season and shouldered the offense in throwing for an ACC record number of yardage despite playing 2 less games than Deshaun Watson, the previous record holder. It was a fun season to watch Syracuse football and finishing again 10-3 with a bowl win. They defeated UNLV in the process, also Georgia Tech, and of course, coming back from 21 down to defeat Miami. Worst losses of the season, of course, they did fall to the Cardinal of Stanford. This team did not look like a very good football team. It looked like smoke and mirrors, much like Duke, until that Miami win gained them some credibility. At number 5 in the ACC, Syracuse. Most of us thought that Jeff Brom, coming back to his alma mater, would be a match made in heaven. Unlike other coaches coming back to their alma mater, that this made sense. And Jeff Brom is one of the best offensive minds and just one of the best head coaches in college football, period. And yes, it's worked out for Louisville. Of course, an ACC championship game appearance in 2023. They followed that up with a bowl win against Washington and a 9-4 finish this past season. Best win against Clemson. They hung in against Notre Dame, of course, playing in the national championship game. What happened against Stanford? I have no idea how they lost to Stanford. Otherwise, they were competitive even in their losses, and the losses are respectable. Tyler Shook, 23 touchdowns, 6 picks. Isaac Brown and Ja'Cory Brooks were playmakers at running back and wide receiver with over 1,000 yards each. Louisville at 5-3 in the ACC, but they were a strong football team aside from the Stanford game. I'm going to have to go back and actually watch that unfold and see how they possibly lost that game to the Cardinal. But otherwise, good football team, number 4 in the ACC. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football for our ACC Power Rankings. Check out the Big 12, and of course, we're going to produce the SEC and the Big 10, and also stick around in the next few days as we rank the conferences 1 through 4, not based on opinion, based on the results on the field. Talk about results on the field. We just mentioned Syracuse coming back from 21 down to defeat Miami. And that's what makes the Hurricane season so disappointing. They ripped off all those wins to start the season. They were dominant. Cam Ward leading the best offense in college football. Arguably, statistically, they finished number 1. And Cam Ward, most likely the best quarterback in all of college football. Of course, a Heisman finalist who brought them back against Virginia Tech and against Cal. A number of near defeats for Miami football, but they finally went down to Georgia Tech, but still had a path and control to get to the ACC championship game and blew it at the Dome, leading Kyle McCord and company 21-0. So just a lost season for Miami. They lost the bowl game, had a 2-score lead, and then Cam Ward, who initially decided to play, give him a lot of credit, but quit, opted out during the game, could have finished the run, could have won the game against Iowa State, most likely, had he stayed in the game, and Miami would have finished with its first 11-win season since 2003. But 10-3, back in the pack in the ACC, only a top 15 finish. Decent season for Mario Cristobal, still considering 7-6 in his first season, but it could have been so much better. At number 3 in our ACC Power Rankings, the U. There was a decision to be made between number 1 and number 2 in the ACC. For me, it wasn't as clear-cut as Clemson won the ACC championship game. They beat SMU. Therefore, SMU has to be number 2. No, SMU finished undefeated in the ACC in the regular season. Their only loss was to BYU, a really good football team that finished 11-2 by 3 points. Clemson, on the other hand, had some ugly performances against Louisville in particular. They were dominated in that game. Of course, they got blown away by Georgia, although SMU didn't have a game like that to play, but Clemson lost that game by 31 points. So in the final analysis, SMU finished with 1 less loss. They did get blown out by Penn State. Had they fared better in the playoff against Penn State, maybe that elevates them, because I'm ranking these teams based on their complete season. Clemson went into the college football playoff, and they took on Texas, and sure, they were dominated at times. The game control went Texas' way. Certainly, they were the inferior team. However, because of Cade Klubnik and the wide receiver core, they hung in the game, and it was a 1-score game with 4 minutes left down at the goal line. They had a chance to do something there. When it's all said and done, Clemson won the ACC. Clemson beat SMU head-to-head, and even though Clemson had control of that game and SMU looked like the much better team in the fourth quarter, coming back from 17 down, got to go with a winner, got to go with a champion. At number 2 in the ACC, SMU. At number 1, Clemson. We appreciate you being here, the Voice of College Football, for our ACC Power Rankings. Again, we will do all the conferences, plus we have so much postseason content to get to involving the transfer portal. Of course, our final edition, Top 25 that actually makes sense, and our conference rankings, and so much more right here at the Voice of College Football.